name is Michael Hutchison. All my friends call me Hutch. It's so great to have you here alive. Welcome. It's nice to see you. You guys look fantastic. I'd like you to introduce yourself. We call that chat area the Hutch Zone, and you're in the Hutch Zone. So what I'd like you to do is introduce yourselves and tell us your first name and where in the world are you watching from? Where in the world are you dialed in from? And let me tell you about today's program. We have a full hour of strategies for you. And here are the topics, the leaders that we promised that we would cover and share with you. Before I give you our agenda, though, what I'd like to ask for you to do is make sure that you've got something to write with, a pen and paper, and some notes. And what I'd like you to do is just sit up in your seats. And for those of you multitasking, just know that I can see you. That's right. With Google, with these Google eyes, I know that some of you have many tabs open, and I'd like to encourage you to close all those tabs. Stay focused, stay with us, sit up in your seats, and learn with us for the next 45, 50 minutes. It's my experience that multitasking is just a great way to ensure mediocrity and average results, and we don't want to have that. Make sure you take great notes so that you can share these notes with your team. And here's our agenda. Number one, we're going to talk about strategies to be consistently persistent, to be a top performer. We're going to talk about strategies to overcome objections. We're going to talk about mistakes to avoid. And then finally, strategies to grow your business and to multiply your profits. I also have a few other outcomes with the leaders. We want you to have fun. Life's too short. Today is Tabless Thursday. What does that mean? That means close all those tabs and stay with us during this entire call. When you stay with us, you may win a prize at the end of the call. And does that sound like a great agenda? Are you guys good with that? And all those in favor of getting started say aye, and all those opposed, so the ayes have it. Let me tell you about the three leaders that we have on. I'm going to call them either Bachelor number one or Bachelorette number one. Margie, it's so good to see you. I see you there. Do you see us?
I made it. Yes, I see you.
Yes, you made it. Awesome. So my dear friend Margie Aliprandi is a 25-year network marketing veteran. She's been one of the world's largest network marketing leaders, and her team, check these numbers out, is over 250,000 people spanning 29 countries. She's been with the same company for 25 years, which really makes her one of the top 1% of network marketing producers worldwide. She's not only a great mom and a great friend, but she's an international speaker and trainer, and she's known as the Have-It-All Coach. She's the best-selling author of several books, including one of my favorites, How to Have Absolutely Everything and Anything That You Want. Margie, welcome. So great to see you.
Thank you. It's good to be here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you as if you're right next door.
Can you hear me?
Yep, he can hear you perfectly.
Yay!
And then I'm going to call her Bachelorette number two, which is Stephanie Davis, just to have fun. My good friend Stephanie Davis is a highly successful businesswoman, also a devoted mom, an animal lover, and a serious student of life. She's educated in psychology and business. She's a master trainer in NLP. She's been a top saleswoman, an entrepreneur, a master distributor, and the corporate president of a multi-million-dollar company. Her declared secret to success is the following. It's through the power of intention and the determination to persevere under the most difficult of circumstances. Steph, welcome. So good to see you.
Thank you. Good to be here, Michael.
All right. And then my lone bachelor, and he's not a bachelor, but I'm just having fun with these guys. John McLelland, Bachelor number one, began his career in high-tech selling in the 1970s, consulting with and training doctors in the use of orthopedic implants and new medical technologies. Within a few years, John knocked it out of the park. He owned his own distributorship, and the firm Zimmer McLelland was recognized as one of the most effective and professional organizations in the industry, and then he retired in 1989. Today, as a network marketing professional, he has 50,000+ distributors in his group covering 50 different countries. And he's got an awesome title, and I like to read it. He's a 4-star platinum team elite, and I know when I interviewed John that he said the title that he was most proud of, besides being a dad and a husband, is the fact that he's the chief ambassador to Nourish the Children. John, welcome.
Thanks, Hutch. It's a pleasure to be here, and especially with Margie and Stephanie.
Awesome. Okay, so let's just get into it right now. So I've got a confession first to share with everybody watching. I am absolutely head over and heels with each of the 7 leaders. You can't have favorites. All of these 7 leaders featured in the book Profiles in Persistence are my favorites. I'm having a bromance with John McLelland and John Hoffman and Jordan Adler, and I'm absolutely in love with Stephanie and Margie, as I suggested. But I want you guys to know, first of all, that I care and respect each and every one of you dearly. The time, the energy, the support that you've offered to me to help get this book written, I can't thank you enough. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Thank you for the gift of your time and generosity. And let's get started with you, Margie. Margie, in a couple of minutes, take our audience through your background and what gives you the right to talk about persistence.
It's one of my favorite topics, Michael. So the thing that gives me the right to talk about it is that I don't quit. I may not be the fastest or the smartest or the best, but I will win because I won't quit. And I've demonstrated that for 26, almost even going on 27 years now. My circumstance when I found network marketing was that I had a background as a junior high school music teacher. I was at a crossroads, single mom, and wondering how I was going to make my house payment. I had tentatively signed a teaching contract to go back to teaching school, but destiny had another plan. And just a few weeks before school started, I happened upon the company that has become a career company for me. And it was the right time, right place, right product. I got passionate, and I jumped in with both feet. And I really, in that moment, I made a whatever it takes decision. And, you know, whatever obstacles. I had 3 little kids, no money. You know, I just did whatever it took. And the persistence came for me in the form of driving across the country in my car because I couldn't afford to fly, and staying in well-lit hotel parking lots because I couldn't afford hotels. Just, you know, kind of doing whatever it took to build a significant income. And, you know, a story for another time, but I really have probably rebuilt my business from scratch 2 or 3 times. So,
2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm uniquely qualified to speak on persistence.
Margie, without a doubt, everything I know about you, you just the ability to get through and to persevere and to knock down any dominoes or any obstacles that get in your way are the things that I know that you live on a day-to-day basis. So I'm so excited and grateful to have you. Stephanie, let's go to you next. Give our listeners a little bit about yourself and what qualifies you to speak about persistence.
Well, my story sounds a little bit like Margie's. It starts as a single mom struggling, you know, how am I going to survive? What am I going to do with these kids? And, you know, I don't know. I think at that point when the chips are down, you just have to decide whether you're going to accept, you know, being a loser in life. And somehow that wasn't in the cards for me or my children. And you know, when I talk about the power of intention, I think that intention, you know, creates passion. And, you know, Margie used the word passion, but it's got to come from somewhere. And I think that when you have an intention, you have a fierce desire, and honestly, I think kids help, you know, because when you have a kid, it's like, hey, I can go die in the streets, but I'm not going to let that happen to these kids. And you something like a fire from within, you know, just makes the decision. That's really all it takes. It just makes the decision. And then when life doesn't show up looking like your decision was the correct one, you know, when it keeps handing you losing cards, you just don't believe it. You just absolutely don't believe it. It's like watching the end of an action movie. You know, you watch the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark, and you already know that he's okay in the end, and you already know that the girlfriend's alive, you know. So when you're going through it, it's exciting, it's scary, but you know it's not real. You know what is real is that you're going to be at the top. You know that one way or the other, you're going to win. And that deep decision creates that passion, which then just makes you unstoppable, because it doesn't matter what life shows you. If it's not what you had laid out for yourself, then you just don't accept it. You just don't believe it, you don't accept it, and whatever you do, you don't wallow in self-talk that tells you otherwise, and you don't hang around with people that tell you otherwise, or you just say yeah, thanks for sharing, and you just keep moving forward. And I, like Margie, have had to rebuild so that strong intention of where you want to be and what you want to be, probably even more importantly. I don't know, life just has to, because your will is stronger than anything life can throw at you.
Stephanie, I have a confession to make. When I met you and interviewed you, I was so tempted to change the title of the book from Profiles in Persistence to Profiles in Tenacity, because spending time with you, you transcended, for me, the idea of persistence to this deep meaning of tenacity, and it really resonates in every fiber of your being. And one of my favorite quotes to post about you is this whole idea of that it's never over until Stephanie Davis says it's over. Okay, let's move on. John, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, give our audience a little bit of your background and tell us what makes you qualified to talk about persistence, please.
Well, you've just heard two very inspirational stories, and there would be nothing in my background, no education or experience, that would have led anybody to believe or have confidence in me that I could go out and do what I did in the medical business. To me, it was all about seeing a vision of what could happen and finding a great mentor. And I latched onto that mentor. I probably stole 50% of his personality, what he did, how he did it, why he did it. And I took some ownership of it, and I branded it me, and it became me. And I started to like me a lot better than the me I used to be. And it was fascinating. And I loved every minute of that business, scrubbing into surgery, working in the operating room, in the emergency room, calling on doctors. And it was a dream come true for me. But I owe it, again, to really finding a passion for the industry I was in, and then secondly, a mentor. And so I sell that business in December of '89, and we were financially well off. But somebody corrupted me forever by telling me about the leverage story, and I couldn't get it off my mind. I just couldn't forget it. I thought I was leveraged with 12 reps, and now all of a sudden they were talking about building massive teams. And it really hit me. I've never been in a position where I could be considered a master distributor, and there had been tens of thousands of distributors before me. But what I did learn is that it was far more important what I did when I got in than worrying about when I got in. And I set a goal, and I wanted to make it to the top level in that company in 1 year. I didn't. It took me an extra couple months. But I can tell you, once again, I picked a great mentor. And once again, I took pieces of this leader and that leader and branded it me. And really, it's a pretty simple story. There's so many great leaders in there. So it's teamwork. You got to have a captain. You start out being just a player, and you end up being a captain.
Okay, wonderful. So audience at home, what I encourage you to do is each time these leaders share their brilliance and their ideas and tips and strategies, just make a few notes to yourself. So for example, John talked about having a team. John talked about having a mentor. Margie talked about making a whatever it takes decision. Stephanie the same. What I'd like you to do is each time they speak, just make a few notes. And then what I'm going to ask you to do is share those distinctions at the end of this call, and more importantly, share them with your team. And what I'd also like you to write in this Hutch zone, in this chat area, is the answer to the following. I believe that persistent focus on your one thing, your priority, is the #1 skill that will ensure your success. And I also believe that persistence and focus are skills that can be taught. And what I'd like you to just answer with me is hey, Hutch, do you agree with me or do you disagree? And if you do, tell me why, and if you don't, tell me why not. And as you're writing those down, I'm just going to fill in just very quickly, why am I qualified, for example, to write a book about persistence and to surround myself with these leaders? So I'm an entrepreneur like many of you on this call. I'm an equity owner in a handful of businesses, and I'm also an author. I'm a third-time author. This is my third book. I started writing books in 2008 with a downturn in the economy, and I write on topics that I feel like are most useful and relevant to putting money in your pockets. And I've been very fortunate to be on winning teams that have exceeded $250 million in revenue in my career. And I've also started and failed probably as many times as the leaders on this call have combined. And from a personal standpoint, when I was in college, I actually was in a bad accident and I broke my back. And I came close to death. And I was told and prescribed that I would be a paraplegic my entire life. And I just told the docs, I said, that's not the life that I know that my God has set out for me, and that's not the life that I want to live. And I ended up wearing a brace in college for 6 months, and I had to wear something that supported my neck this entire time. It was one of the more frustrating times in my life, and I worked incredibly hard to rehabilitate my body. And then when I graduated from school, I went to work in my first startup, I went to work for a guy named Tony Robbins. And maybe you're familiar with him, and maybe you've read his books or programs. But when I started with Tony, I left a very comfortable salaried position with electronic data systems to go on the road in a commission-only job and to promote our seminars that had not been featured yet. And I found out after I had left this company that not only were we in debt, but we were way past zero. We were $750,000 in debt. And I had to make a decision like Margie talked about. My decision was I either had to go home or I had to go big. And I couldn't go home because I had a wife and daughter. And so that whatever it takes decision, and as John talked about, this decision that you make to propel yourself forward is what I did. And we ended up growing Tony's business into one of the biggest personal development training companies in the world. And if you've just joined us, we're talking about the book Profiles in Persistence. If you just joined us, you're late. And that's okay, that's cool. And the question I have for you is, what is persistence? How do you get it? Are you born with it? Is it a muscle that can be developed and strengthened? And let me go back to our leaders. And let me start with you, Steph. Each of you are incredibly successful. But I'd like to ask you, Steph, what's the hardest part of your job on a day-to-day basis? Stephanie, what's the hardest part of your job on a day-to-day basis?
I think the hardest part, it really goes back to Stephen Covey. It's to really determine that you're going to spend time on the important rather than dealing with the urgent, because squander so many days, weeks, months, and not moving really forward by focusing on urgent. And you really need to just block out a certain amount of time for what's important to you in your life.
Okay, awesome. Great answer. And then Margie, let's go to you next, please. What do you just share with us, because you're so transparent? What do you struggle with? What is your single best tip or strategy to be persistent? Because you're so good. So two-part question. What do you struggle with? And what's your single best tip strategy to be persistent? And Steph, think about that, because I'm going to circle back to you and ask you that same second part question. What's your best tip to remain persistent? But let's move to Margie, please.
So what I think the biggest challenge is in our business is staying poised on that idea of high intention, low attachment. Right? Nobody owes us anything in this business. They're going to become involved and make the decisions that they make because of their own heart, their own dreams. And we develop a team and we attract people and we get expectation going about what they should do and when they should do it. And to be able to keep our intention high but not attached to any one person being the one that is going to be the one, so to speak. And so I think that's just an amazingly interesting dance in this business where we all are our own boss and building at our own pace, and yet we all have these huge goals and objectives and dreams, and it's just like you can keep those and keep them solidly in place. but you can't get attached that it's any one person. And you got to love people right where they are and keep holding the bigger vision for them, and yet not put your expectation or your agenda, like, you know, I need you to do this so that I can get this rank or whatever. I mean, like, that is for you to have the goal of getting to the top of your plan, and yet not attached to any one person as the way that will happen. Like, that's a really important dance that we just do all the time, loving people where they are. And the best strategy, I think, is to just understand the nature of this business. I believe if people could see it from, say, the vantage point of John and Steffi and other people that are in the book that have persisted, that have put one foot in front of the other, even when we've doubted ourselves, even when our belief is low, even when our vision is small, but we just keep going and you know, do our best to pull ourselves up from the bootstraps. What we see now in hindsight is an extraordinary journey, is an amazing outcome. And if in the beginning you could just realize that there is a sowing season and a reaping season, and they are not in the same season. The only thing we control is how many seeds we plant. It's the only thing in our control. We cannot control which ones are going to, you know, take root and bear fruit, but we can plant. In our control is how many people do we talk to? How many invitations do we make? How often do we talk to somebody about taking a look? So the strategy is understand the nature of the business. Sowing season, reaping season. Trust the process. Be patient. Keep going. Do what you know to do day in, day out. The harvest will come. It's a law of the universe.
Awesome, awesome. Okay, again, audience, make sure you're getting these distinctions down. Great strategy shared there. Thank you, Margie. And then, John, with you as well. In general, what makes the direct selling profession difficult? If you feel that that's an accurate description. If you don't, let's talk about that. And then what I'd like to have you then follow up with is, what's your single best tip or strategy to remain persistent? Thank you, John.
Well, thanks, Hutch. You know, it's a different kind of hard. It's a different kind of difficult. We see in some jobs it's just bore through the labor and put in more hours. And in this, because you tend to put yourself out there with all of your belief and your passion and your emotion, and you get rejected, you've got to do some gut checks. And I remember developing early on in this career here in direct selling what I called a self-interview. And I'd find if I let myself at my desk, or even when I was walking or waking up, just go through the mental torment of the last days, I would get pretty down. So I required myself to do a self-interview in the mirror, literally look at myself and have a conversation with myself. Who am I? What are my goals? What am I going to do today to make those goals real? And something about focusing in and looking at yourself through the mirror, in the mirror, with your own eyes, it was a very, very revealing moment. And so, you know, I think the industry gets difficult because we want it sometimes for people so much more than they want it for themselves. So much so that we're oftentimes tempted to do it for them instead of with them. And you have to learn that lesson. And the advice given here has been great. So life's difficult. Living it. I love the movie In the Pursuit of Happiness with Will Smith, and the fact that one scene, because I love sports, and he's on the basketball court with his son Jaden, who's his real son, and the young kid's got dreams and aspirations. And he goes, I'm going to go pro, I'm going to go pro. And then Will Smith in the movie says, you're not going to make it. I just have to tell you, I'm looking at your skills and you're not going to make it. And that defining moment when he realizes he's stolen his dream of his son, and he said, you know, when people can't do something, they like to tell other people they can't do it either. If you want something, just go out and get it. And at the end of the day, you just have to do that in this business. And because it is difficult. I've quit mentally 1,000 times. But luckily, I restarted 1,001.
Wonderful. Awesome. Awesome. And then, Steph, let's circle back to you. I'd like for you to share, what's your single best tip or strategy to remain persistent, please? Steph, you there? Okay. Steph, there you are. Oh, there you go.
Lost the connection.
Okay, here we go. So again, I'm circling back to you and just asking you, what's your single best tip or strategy to remain persistent? Whoops. Okay.
I'm going to say it a little differently. When you said you've got to either go home or go big, I want to hook onto that for a minute. And she was talking about, focusing on the intention but having small agendas. So let me say this another way, because it's the same principle, and that is that when you're trying to control the big things, and in this industry, trying to control people, trying to control their desires, trying to control the company, trying to control so many things, you're going to make yourself smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. But when you trust in the big, you trust in the big idea, you trust in the universe, and you trust in the big self, you trust in yourself as part of the whole, then you end up with a fearlessness, because you don't have to control it all. The only thing you have to control, just like Margie said, is what can I do today? And you need to banish procrastination and focus on what steps can I do today, because the only thing you can control is how many times you pick up the phone, how many people you talk to, how many things that you do. You can't control what the ultimate result of that's going to be, but you can trust in the ultimate result. And so, as I reality and the little agenda and trying to do it your way, and that's just the little you. If you want to be big, if you want to play big, you got to be big. You can't be the little you. You've got to really trust in the universe and focus on little steps for yourself. Let the little self do the little steps, and let the big mind have the big intent.
Okay, I love it. It takes big ideas, big dreams, big goals to play big. And so 3 big answers from 3 great big leaders. I'd like to just ask the audience at home, does everybody know the name Janet Yellen? So if you don't, Janet Yellen is the first ever woman chair of the United States Federal Reserve. She's one of the most powerful women on the planet. And I was reading last month that she was a commencement speaker at NYU, and I loved her speech. She told these graduates that, guess what? You're coming out of school, but you know what? You're not going to succeed all the time. She went on to say that the best qualities of success is not based on your ability, but rather your grit and your persistence. And she shared this definition that you may want to jot down. She told these students that persistence is an abiding commitment to work hard toward long-range goals and to persevere through the setbacks that come along the way. An abiding commitment to work hard toward long-range goals and to persevere through the setbacks that come along the way. And my single best tip or strategy to be persistent, 3 words. It's your choice. You have to decide. Each of these leaders have said it. Never quit. Become certain about your plan. You know what? Any time in my life that I've had a setback or that I failed, so for example, when I broke my back, I have developed this habit that I'll share with you that it's made a huge difference, and it's these power-focusing questions that I ask myself. And so when I broke my back in college, I said, what's the one thing that I can do in this bed to get me out of bed so that I can walk and run? And you know what I focused on? I focused on the ability just to wiggle my toes. So as these leaders talked about, just a small step, what was the one thing that I could do to enable myself to get out of bed so that I could walk and run someday? And it started with a question, a big question, and the big answer was figure out a way just to wiggle your toes. And I'd also like to challenge the audience, if anybody, because I'm on this mission for persistence, if anybody can provide and verify the name of a school, middle school, high school, or college or university, any education institute on the planet that teaches a course in persistence or grit or focus, and you send me the name of that school, in exchange, I'll send you a copy of our book, Profiles in Persistence. And let's talk about objections. I know that nobody on this call is met with objections, but let's field some of these now. I'd like you to, in the chat zone, perhaps tell us what's the toughest objection or obstacle that you're facing right now. What's holding you back from making more money? Has there been any objection that's crippled your confidence? And what haven't you been able to answer? And we'll pull a couple of those. And I had actually somebody that emailed me in advance, and I'd like for you to handle this one, John, if you would. And the objection is that you've shared this presentation about your business and the business opportunity, and the candidate that you're in front of, John, says, this is great, John, but you know what? I just need to talk it over with my spouse. How do you handle that objection that I need to talk it over with my spouse? Please, John.
Well, I'm sure all three of us would answer that a little bit differently, but I believe in either being proactive or reactive. And in this situation where somebody told you exactly what the objection is, that's the first step, kind of knowing they really need to throw it by. I would encourage that. I would say, fantastic. Do you think you have enough information? Or would you like me to help share that information with you? But I like to do a little barometer. I say, okay, great. As you do that, let me just ask you a question. I get it back off that objection. On a scale of 1 to 10, where do you find your interest right now? What are you, a 9, a 10, an 8? Where are you? Now, if they say, well, I don't know, then it's really maybe the spouse is just an excuse. But if they tell me they're an 8 or a 9 or a 10, I'm going to help coach them through it.
Awesome. And then, Margie, let's come to you. I love your entire philosophy about high intention, loving everybody, but holding things lightly. Is there anything you'd like to share, again, in terms of tips or strategies, just in general, because I think you have such a brilliant way to handle it on the objections that you're met with or your team is met with on a day-to-day basis? Margie, you want to talk about any objections that you'd like to talk about?
Yes. First of all, I really like the idea of being proactive with the objections. Since we know what the major objections are, kind of like time and money and who am I going to talk to, those can be answered in the presentation or in the three-way call. I'm a big believer in three-way calling. And then I really love the use of stories. Like, I can't tell you how often I have utilized, say, this story of somebody that is super busy and they've got kids and yet they made such and such in their first full month in the business by finding pockets of time and, you know, just anticipating what some of those might be and how by working as a team, you know, you've got leverage by leveraging our credibility, our experience. Like, you've got a team behind you now. So people get rid of the fear of going it on their own, and just so much of it can be handled by stories. If they throw the objection of, you know, who would I talk to, or how do I have credibility? Say, you know, my 21-year-old daughter who, you know, most of the people she knows, they maybe don't view her as a lot of credibility in terms of understanding finances or anything, and yet by leveraging the team around her, she's been able to create, like, she made $1,400 in her first month. And so it's just the telling of stories, real life stories, and that's why it's so valuable to create a strong getting started story, because it can serve you for, you know, your whole career.
Okay, awesome. And then Steph, let's circle back to you. In general, how do you set yourself up in a mindset in terms of being able to handle objections that people may share with you, please? What's your mindset as it relates to handling objections?
Well, once again, I have to agree with Margie. I think that you can actually avoid most objections by doing a really, really good job in the presentation. And I think that for me, the most important thing to understand about objections is it's like a bell curve. If on the left-hand side you have, you know, the beginning of the time, so as you go to the right, it's the time you spend with somebody, and going upwards is, you know, sort of like how much you're persisting in attempting to persuade them or whatever, in presenting to them. It's kind of like a bell curve. There's a point at the top where you've given them all of your best information, which is not just the company and what you have to offer, but really how your package fits with them. And that means that you should have listened to them as most of the presentation. Listen to them, find out what's going on with them. Then when you present, it matches them. So you've already provided the jigsaw puzzle for them to the best of your ability. You've done a great job, and you're at that peak. And that peak is where now they have all the information they need to make a decision. I think that you have to honorably and respectably give the person the ability to make a decision for their own life. You've done the best that you can. And so at that point, you have to shake hands. And you're either shaking hands to say, welcome to the team, or you're shaking hands to say, you know, this isn't for you right now. Let's talk about something else. And just let it go. So you're shaking hands and moving on, maybe coming back to it later, or you're shaking hands to get them on the team. And I think that if you are ready for that moment, either way, and this is where I think you have to do a motive check before you leave the door, but once you're ready for them to make a legitimate decision for themselves, I think that it frees you to have an energy not of desperation, not of pushiness, but of really being that advisor who's willing for them to choose the best for themselves. And honestly, I think you don't get a whole lot of objections then. You either get, you know, very wholehearted yeses to what you're offering, or it really isn't right for them at this time, and you're noble enough to know that that's true.
Wonderful. Okay, great answers, great answers. My best tip for overcoming objections is just pretty straightforward. I treat objections just as a complaint, as if somebody were commenting on the weather. You know, somebody says, man, it's hot. Hutch, gosh, it's hot. I say, you know what? You're right, it is hot. So nothing more, nothing less. I like Margie's strategy. I love all the strategies that were shared. I acknowledge the complaint. I agree with them, and then I just move on. And let's move to the next agenda item, which is about mistakes and mistakes to avoid. So we're all human, and we're going to fail, and we're going to make mistakes. And as I suggested in the beginning, I've made more than most people on this call combined. And according to the Direct Selling Association, the number one criticism of the direct selling profession is the failure rate. So I've got a couple of two-part questions. I'm going to start with you, please, Margie. And Margie, if you'd share again in full transparency, what's your biggest mistake and what's your best advice to avoid failure? Please, Margie.
So the biggest mistake was, in the beginning, I felt that it was my job to convince. And so I felt that the most important thing that happened was how well I presented and all of my compelling points. And, you know, and it became so challenging because at some point, if I'm talking them into it and they're doing it because I, you know, wrangled them in, then I feel like I've got responsibility to make them successful too. And it was just like this incredible weight, you know, like I felt like I had to do it all, influence them and all that. When I learned that my job was just to love them and ask questions so that I could see if what I've got is a fit for them, it's like everything changed. And so the answer to that would be to shift from your desires and your, you know, what you really want them on your team to duplicate, to your desire to serve. And when you take that posture, I'm looking for those who I'm going to leave every person who crosses my path with a feeling of increase. And I'm going to love them. Like it just works. And it brings such ease when you're coming from a place of service. And asking questions like, how easy is that? And then just listening with, you know, that multi-sensory listening where you're listening with your heart and you're watching their expressions and you're just, you know, feeling them. And plus, when you're coming from that place, people know it. If you've got dollar signs in your eyes, like that repels people when they feel like they're part of someone else's agenda. When you love and you ask questions and you volunteer that maybe you've got something that's a fit, like it just works.
You're spot on, absolutely spot on. Great answer. And then you, John, we're 6 months into the year, almost the end of July. And my question to you is, what are the obvious mistakes or even perhaps embarrassing mistakes that you see your leaders, maybe your leaders don't commit them at all, or perhaps your brand new associates, what are they making that you know that are avoidable? What are those perhaps embarrassing mistakes either your leaders or your associates are making on a day-to-day basis? Please, John.
That's one thing I see that's all too common is that, you know, they hear the presentation and they get excited about it, and they think that there's a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. In other words, when I'm making this amount of money and I accomplish this, I will be happy. And in reality, as soon as you can understand that the journey is the reward in this business, and you know that you can have fun and enjoyment and fulfillment along the way, even though you're learning and you're fumbling, this is, into the year, you have to have that perspective. If for one moment you believe you can't be happy until you have found an XYZ of success, I doubt you'll be happy when you get there. And so, understanding that, pure and simple, enjoy the journey, it is the reward.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, and then Steph, same question. What are the suggestions, tips that you offer to your leaders, to avoid the landmines, the obvious landmines when growing your business? What are your best tips or strategies to avoid failure?
Well, I'm going to take both of what they said and, again, say it a little bit differently. I think success leaves the same clues for everybody. But definitely people make the mistake of the pot of gold, and I'm going to say it a little differently. This is a business where you have to put the majority of the work in at the beginning. You've got to take off full throttle with the airplane before you can coast. And people think that since that pot of gold is there, that somehow they're supposed to get rich right away. And you really can't look at it that way. And you can't look at, oh, look at all this hard work for this little money that I'm getting. Because, if people ask me now how much I made in my first year, I'd have to say, well, that's kind of a stupid question, because now, I'm still earning from that first year. So what do you want me to add up? The first year and the first effort will pay you forever. You can't think of, oh, I'm not getting paid enough now, or oh, this isn't worth it. People quit too soon, because this is a business where it looks like a lot of hard work for a little bit of reward in the beginning, but then later on it's like, wow, I don't even have to get out of bed today if I don't want to, and I'm earning, like, wow, huge 7-figure income. I mean, you can't see it the way a normal job is. So that's mistake number one. And mistake number two is exactly what Margie said. You can't, and the biggest mistake I made was thinking that because I needed big numbers to get big money in this business, that I should want anybody and everybody on my team, and that I needed them on my team. And oh man, is that the wrong way to look at it. You only need a couple of key people on your team, so choose well. And if somebody isn't open to the gift, just like she said, you are offering an amazing gift, and you're not looking for everybody to take it. You're looking for the people who resonate and want that, and if they don't, you love them anyway. In other words, you're going to love them no matter what. That's what I mean by that handshake. It's like you're totally going to allow people to do what's best for them. That's what you want. That's why you need the motive check, because if your motive is for them to make you rich because you need them on your team, you're going to get a bunch of people on your team that think you owe them something, and they're going to want you to do the work for them. The only way you're going to get a team that grows naturally with your help is when you get a team who really wants to be there, who sees the gift. It's the right time, the right place. They resonate with it, and they're ready to come along with you. Choose them as your little team, and then help them to find that in their little team. Everybody doesn't need a lot of people. Everybody just needs some good people. So when you teach people how to recruit with a better attitude, I think it changes the whole game.
Awesome. And Steph, I'm going to stay with you. Just some questions of curiosity. Is there such a thing as too much marketing in the direct selling profession, in your opinion? Such a thing as too much marketing?
Well, I'm not sure if you're asking, like, can someone do too much marketing, or is there too much in the field? I think there's a lot of people that do a lot of marketing that doesn't get them anywhere, because fundamentally, even in this highly networked age and where you have so much cheap marketing, this is a people business, and everybody only needs a few people. So I don't think that anybody needs mass marketing, really, in this business. I think that everything needs to fuel the main game, which is the person-to-person. So I think a lot of the marketing in that sense is kind of useless in this industry, but I could be wrong.
Okay, awesome. And then Margie, again, just a question of curiosity. Do you ever find that your people perhaps spend too much time on social media? Again, just a generalization. But is there such a thing as spending too much time on social media and Facebook as an example? Not necessarily picking on Facebook, but just the question in general. Please, Margie.
I think that it is sort of an advanced skill to learn what are the revenue producing activities, and with some good mentoring you can guide people. Yeah, I think that you know, that some people they lack the belief or the vision or the confidence to speak with people in their warm market, and so they sort of like try to find other methods, and they can waste time. Facebook can be an amazing tool, but you know, at the end of the day, every relationship is a personal one. If I have team members that are sort of just doing a broadcast kind of a message, I think that's wrong idea. I mentor not to do that, because you know, it's still meeting that one-on-one person, seeing if there is a need, cultivating a relationship. And you know, social media as a tool can be fantastic. For example, we're doing some tour dates around the country right now, and I went into Facebook and did a search. People I know in Oklahoma, friends I know in Connecticut, and like all these names come up. And I took a look, and if I could see that somebody, you could tell by who their friends are and your friends are, if they're committed in an opportunity, I would never personal message them. But if it looks like maybe they're not, like I just invited them, you know, come meet me, let's have a cup of tea, and you know, maybe join me. And I had people, you know, say, yes, I would love to, let's do it. And so in that personal one-on-one way in a community where you've fostered relationships and potentially that you've given some inspiration and shared genuinely, that you're not always like trying to, you know, get your agenda out there. Anyway, so yeah, I think people can waste time. I think it's a great tool, and I think leaders can mentor how to utilize it so that it is a positive and not negative.
Okay, great answer. And then you, John, let's finish up with you strong as it relates to mistakes. So what I heard both Margie and Stephanie talk about is this idea of activity and productivity. Can you talk about you know, the mistakes that you see your people in not engaging with others and perhaps not filling your calendar? Can you comment on this whole discussion and give us some, you know, great suggestions as it relates to being productive as opposed to just filling your calendar with activities? Please talk about that, John.
Absolutely, and it is so easy to just let yourself get distracted or find an excuse to do something. In the world of, quote, recruiting, we know rejection lies ahead, and so people tend to put it on the back burner at times. But in reality, I think we've heard great advice here. What I find so frustrating is not necessarily in the recruiting and the prospecting and the inviting, but how little time is often spent in doing the presentation and planning for it. We live in the most exciting time in the history of the world. An average person with multimedia can show a PowerPoint, a PDF, a video clip, and it makes them, along with their story, the most powerful presentation that you could ever give. It's equivalent to seeing the Martin Luther King I Have a Dream speech or the Steve Jobs iPhone release. That's how passionate we are about what we're doing. But they seem to get so beat up and worn out in the recruiting area that they lose it when it counts most, that time to present. And so I just think that if there's one thing we could do, that's showtime. That's your Super Bowl. That's your World Series. That's what you've looked for. And now, if you embrace that and you get good at telling stories and you can hit the emotional needle along with the facts and the figures and the data, you will find success. Okay, awesome. And again, just remind you're in the Hutch Zone, and we're talking about our new book, Profiles in Persistence, with the featured leaders, Stephanie Davis, Margie Aliprandi, John McLelland. I'm going to go back to you, please, Margie. Share with the audience what has been the most profitable decision of your career. And perhaps you've made this decision over and over. I know you've built your business several times, and you've reinvented yourself, but what's the most profitable decision you've made of your career, please?
It's
Margie,
probably
you want to handle that
one of the most powerful. Yeah, I got it. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can, perfectly.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, all right. All right. So I think it goes back to a story that I've shared early on when one of the most defining moments for me, of course, my why was to give my 3 little kids a better life. They were 5, 4, and 2 years of age, and I knew that as a school teacher I wasn't going to be able to do that. Now, back in the day, we really built our business belly to belly, and I was out every single evening, you know, sometimes doing 2 and 3 home meetings in a single night, and getting in front of a lot of people, and business was growing, but it was also taxing, and it was taxing on me and on the family. And I remember one night when my son, who is now 28, he was probably 2 or 3 at the time, came running out crying. And it was one of those moments when I asked myself, am I really doing this for them? Because I'm getting less time with them than if I had, you know, if I was working for minimum wage somewhere. And, you know, like I had all of those doubts kind of well up inside of me. And as I held him and made a promise that if they would go inside and that they would not, you know, that they would support me and not cry, that one day I would take them everywhere I go. And I think, you know, in that moment, I had to choose, like, did I want, I think it was Stephanie that said, do I want the big future for the kids, or do I want this immediate moment, like right now? Like, it was so hard to make that decision, and I hugged him, and I went off and did the meeting, and it was the right decision, but it was not an easy one. And now, you know, now I can look from that 60,000-foot view, and I'm so grateful that in that defining moment I chose the big picture decision for the kids, and not what seemed in the immediate, like, you know, the most compelling in the moment kind of a thing. So keeping your eye on the goal, the big objective. I mean, that's a decision that you can make every single day, right? You can choose the big picture and keep going toward that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, thanks for being so open and opening your heart up to your children and to the people that you work with, and sharing with our audience. And Steph, same question for you. What's been the most profitable decision of your career, and what's the best advice that you'd give to the audience to grow your business and multiply your profits, please, Steph?
Well, I think that the most profitable decision that I made for myself, am I on?
You are.
Oh, okay. All right, so the most profitable decision was probably just to stay with the same company. I mean, it's so tempting. There's so many companies, and everybody's always, you know, soliciting you to come and join their company. And I've been with my company since day one, you know, of its starting. And you know, when you spend decades being loyal and dedicated, you know, I think it really pays off. And so, especially in this industry now, I think that maybe people need to stop being jumpers, you know, and thinking the grass is greener on the other side of the fence. I mean, that doesn't mean you stay with a company that's truly got major problems or, you know, ethical issues or whatever. But if your company seems, if it was the right one when you joined it, and it seems like the right one now, why jump over somewhere else? Because I think that in this industry, you know, you have to have the roots to really get the tree. And I think a lot of people just aren't into roots these days. So for me, anyway, that was definitely the most profitable decision. The other, when you ask about the general success, you know, I have to just keep going back to this big and small, and I know we've all said this theme over and over and over again, but you just really have to decide on the big picture, and don't settle. Don't settle. That's it. You know, when Margie's talking about the decision with the kid, yeah, you can settle, and you can tell yourself little stories about how it's really important to my kid's life that I sit here and watch a movie and have popcorn with them right now. But maybe that's really just an excuse. You know, maybe you're just chicken, you know, to go and do the hard work. You've got to really be disciplined in the big picture, and not let the little self, you know, tell you all kinds of stories that are going to stop you. You know, you are your worst enemy. In procrastination and rationalization and, you know, desire, the baubles, the trinkets, whatever, you know.
Okay, I think we lost Steph. We'll let her come back on. Okay, and then John, let's come back to you, please, sir. What's been the most profitable decision of your career? And then share with the audience, what are some tips or strategies that you use with your teams to attract more customers on a day-to-day basis, please, John?
I think I can lump that all into one thing. You know, we have found a way, those of us that are successful, to turn our passion into profit. It might be something to do with our product. It may be the very business that we're in. We're passionate about it. I remember Hutch one day being a little bit down. I divide my life very simply: moments of misery and moments of magic. And those moments of magic are those great things. And I thought to myself, how do I really feel when I go out and I buy a new Hugo Boss suit? And I look at it and I go, whoa! I mean, I just can feel the electricity. Or I buy a Mercedes, or whatever it is. And then I thought to myself, I am passionate about this business. I'm passionate about helping people. And it's been said here today, the power of story and making the story personal, making it real, letting people engage in that. The analytics right now talk about in what stories mean and how they really turn on emotional buttons, whether it's a presidential election or whether we're recruiting for our company. And so my advice to anybody is that you become inspired by the people you're around, the people you work with, and then listening to programs like this with incredible leaders. I've taken notes today. We're always learning. But I would go back to that statement. Just find a way to turn a passion into a profit, and just keep working with that passion.
That's right. Absolutely right. And audience at home, so we're just about over with our time, but do I have your permission just to wrap up and ask each of these leaders a couple of words of inspiration? And before I do, I'd like to just encourage you, the why behind this call. Again, the reason I wrote this book was, one, to share the stories, to promote the brilliance and wisdom of these leaders. And I'm absolutely convinced that you could fly around the country, or if you're lucky enough to find these leaders in some spot in the world and spend some time with them, or you could invest in our book. And that's the investment for the book is $13 for paperback and $9 on Amazon. And so I would just encourage you to pick up a copy today. Pick up lots of copies. Pick up many copies for your team. And the why behind it is that I write books to give money away, if you will. And the benefactor for this book is a charity called Days for Girls International. And Celeste Mergens and her team runs this organization. And when I first heard of the story behind, talk about a compelling story behind Days for Girls, my heart was tugged in an immediate and significant way. I have a daughter, and Days for Girls provides feminine hygiene products for young women and girls around the world that don't have access to them. And so the proceeds from this book go to a great cause. And again, go to Amazon, pick up several copies, go to the profileandpersistence.com website, and share lots of these copies with your team. And then let's circle back with each of the leaders and then just ask them each, what are some final words of wisdom? Are you excited about the future? What are you looking forward to? And just leave our audience with some inspiring words for these folks to take on their day. And let's go with you, please, Steph.
Yeah. Sorry, I lost my electrical power. I had to go move to another location.
There you go again, being tenacious and persistent.
That's
Even
right.
Just electricity can't keep you away.
You're a champ.
Find a plug somewhere. I'm in a hotel lobby. So I guess let's go with that. It's the title of the book. It's just the whole thing is really just finding the strength within. Really just again focusing on yourself as something bigger than the little puny you that you know, and don't give the puny you that you know any attention, and don't give circumstances attention. Give your attention to what really matters. And so maybe the first step would be to decide what really matters. Decide what really matters to you in your life and what you're going to hold to no matter what, and then everything else just becomes non-negotiable. And when that happens, you know what, the universe just flows in behind you. I mean, sometimes it doesn't look like it's doing it, but when you don't fall for it, then you see the reality again. You see that light at the end of the tunnel, and you say, yep, I knew it was there. But it's the I knew it was there that you have to cultivate. So that would be my final statement.
I love it. I love it. And again, just to recap, go big, think big, play big, be big, but then narrow your focus. Decide what matters most. And Stephanie encapsulates that philosophy, and she lives it, and she is a giver and delivers that message on a consistent basis. And let's go with you, please, Margie. Let's wrap up. What would be some final words of wisdom that you'd like to inspire our audience with, please?
Well, first of all, I want to say how honored I am to be a part of this project, and I believe in what you're doing, Michael. I really believe in Days for Girls, and I know that the other leaders who participated in this book, we all are extremely busy, but when we find something that touches our heart, like your project, we make room for it. And I want to just encourage everyone to get the book because it has value for your own personal journey, and then the benefit for Days for Girls is just amazing. So what I would say is, in final words, give yourself the gift of a whatever it takes decision. It sounds counterintuitive, but actually it makes everything easier. When you've decided you will proceed whatever it takes, you don't have to weigh it always. We waste so much time vacillating back and forth, wondering if our decision is right based on whatever feedback we might be getting from people or our challenges or rejection or whatever. Make a whatever it takes decision. And also give yourself the gift of massive action. Honestly, when so much magic happens when you give yourself short spurts of massive action. You get so good, you become confident, you create a momentum within your team, you set the pace, people follow you, you duplicate. I mean, everything happens. And then the last thing, you know, John already said this, I've marveled a couple of times when I hear John actually say the very words I've used, or Stephanie say the very words I've used to describe something, and that is that the most important thing that happens in our network marketing journey is who we become in the process, because it's the being piece, who we are, that really ultimately attracts people to become a part of our team and a part of our community and stay with us. And there's no better ground, there's no better vehicle for us to truly become ourselves and help others become our best selves than our amazing business. So thank you for creating this project. Thank you for including me, Stephanie and John. I'm inspired by you guys. I got all kinds of notes myself. Thank you, Michael.
Wonderful. And then John, finish this up. Final words of inspiration for the audience. What would you share?
I too have enjoyed this tremendously. What a great session. And I would urge people to get the book. You know, 24 years in this industry, and I found myself highlighting nearly every page and writing footnotes and really enjoying the book. Closing, you know, nobody gets to live their life backwards. You know, you have to look ahead. That's the only place the future lies. It does not matter where you've been. It doesn't matter what you've been through. You know, Muhammad Ali said, "I am the greatest," and then right after that he said, "By the way, I said that before I knew I was." Self-confidence is so important. and you've got to have that. This is a mental game, a total mental game. And do whatever it takes. This I will promise you. You've heard from Margie and from Stephanie and from Hutch today. There is no greater business in the world. We are so honored and privileged to be in the greatest industry in the world. It changes lives. So I urge you, and I love the fact that we've all been with our company so long. We're committed, but we're committed to the industry and love to share it to you. So congratulations on making a good decision to be here. Make a great decision. Get books for you and your team. Thanks, Hutch.
Thank you, John. And audience at home, again, you heard it from each of the leaders, and I'll just reinforce it. I challenge you to stay persistent. Yes, it's tough, but the ability to go the distance, the ability to immerse yourself in personal growth, to test your abilities, is worth all the discipline that it takes to create those results. And I just ask you to remember, you don't necessarily choose your future, you choose your habits. And your habit of persistence and focus and reading will create your future. And last message, don't be average. Don't just do enough. Let's rid the world of being average. For me, being average is a malaise. It's an epidemic, and we need to stop it. And again, I encourage you to get several copies of the book. Of course, I'm biased. I think the material is outstanding. I thank each and every one of you, Stephanie, Margie, John. High five, hugs and kisses. Go on, take on your day. To you at home, thanks for being here. I look forward to meeting you personally. God bless. Keep making things happen. So long for now.
Bye-bye.
Good job.